members is simple: to empower voters and defend democracy. To fulfill that mission, the League not only registers voters and holds candidate forums like this one, but is also active in advocacy, lobbying, and civics education. For example, the Seattle-King County chapter will host a 4-part series entitled Homelessness: How Did We Get Here? The first in this series is on October 26th at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. Anyone can register for this free public event by going to the League's website at lwvskc.org. The League welcomes members of all genders. If our mission resonates with you, we invite you to become a member. But our specific mission tonight is to introduce the November 7 general election school board candidates to Seattle voters. The school board is an elected body of 7 citizens who serve 4-year terms and represent geographical districts within the city. Candidates for District 1, 2, 3, and 6 will appear on the ballot. School board directors are elected by district, and candidates must live in the district they represent. However, following the primary, all voters across the district can vote in all 4 races in the upcoming general election. We ask the candidates to place both their name and district number on their Zoom screen so the audience can easily identify them. Responsibilities of a school board member include hiring and evaluating the superintendent, establishing governing policies, adopting a balanced budget, having legal and fiduciary authority for the district, adopting instructional materials, and serving as community representatives to and on behalf of the district. Tonight, we welcome 7 of the 8 candidates for the Seattle School Board, and we thank them for their participation. An 8th candidate has informed us she is unable to attend for health reasons and is not sending a statement. In organizing this event, the League's Education Committee has taken the laboring oar on the League's behalf and has partnered with other key sponsors. Specifically, we would like to thank the Seattle Council PTSA, which represents over 80 PTAs and PTSAs in the Seattle Public Schools, and its president, Elsa Hunason Jones, who is a deaf-blind author, media editor, media critic, professor, and historian. Seattle Council PTSA advocates for schools and families from underrepresented communities whose voices need to be heard and often are not. We would also like to thank the NAACP Youth Committee and its chair and well-known advocate, Rita Green. We are thankful to the Greater Seattle Child Care Business Coalition and Susan Brown, a founding member who is also a staunch child advocate and founder and CEO of Kids Co. We appreciate the willingness of these sponsor organizations and individuals to partner with the League to organize this nonpartisan event. Finally, we want to thank Allison Freyer, the League's administrator, who has been and is working tirelessly to keep the technical aspects of this virtual forum running smoothly. It's now time to introduce tonight's moderator. Lois Martin is president and director of the Community Day Center for Children, Inc., which is located within the District 3 of the Seattle School District. She has served as a board member and leader of local and state early care and education advisory boards, along with local community groups. Thank you, Lois, for serving as our moderator this evening. At this time, I'll ask you to outline tonight's rules for both our audience and the candidates as we begin the forum.
Thank you, Tammy, for your opening remarks, and welcome everyone to this candidate forum. My name is Lois Martin, and I'm your moderator for this event. The candidates will all be asked the same questions. All candidates were invited to participate and receive the questions in advance. I will ask a question to the candidates and name the candidate to respond. The order the candidates are asked to respond will alternate with each question. Before I read each question, I will remind candidates how much time they have to respond. We're asking our audience to please use the Zoom Q&A for any questions, and we will be collecting those questions and we'll ask them as time allows. Time limits candidates will be strictly enforced. Our timekeeper, Susan Brown, is using the Zoom clock that is visible to all, and candidates will be responsible to notice the countdown. If necessary, I will interrupt a candidate to discontinue an answer if the allotted time has been exceeded, or if the time is used for a personal attack on another candidate or includes racial, ethnic, or gender slurs. The Zoom webinar screen shows only the candidate's moderator and timer. The audience will not be shown, and all audience members will be muted. So, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce the Seattle School Board candidates here with us tonight. I would like for each candidate to introduce yourself and tell us why we should vote for you. And we'll start with Liza Rankin from District 1. And
Hi.
Liza, you'll have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Liza Rankin. I'm the current Seattle School Board Vice President and Legislative Liaison. I'm the mom of 2 SPS students, and I'm a former SPS student myself. And I'm running for re-election because we're at a critical time for public education. We need board directors who know our communities, our schools, know the complexities of the budget and enrollment challenges we are facing, and can navigate the many demands of our system while prioritizing equity and centering on our students. I have a proven record of student-centered and equity-focused policy work, institutional knowledge, and community relationships from a decade of advocacy to build on and continue to support positive progress in Seattle public schools. And I'm committed to putting my skills and experience to work to rebuild not just trust and confidence, but joy and excitement in our education system. Our kids deserve it, and I'm committed to this work. And I thank you so much for the time tonight.
Right, thank you very much. Debbie Carlson, District 1.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Carlson. I'm running for Seattle School Board Director here in District 1. I am a parent of a first grader and a former advocacy chair at Olympic Hills Elementary. I am a former tenured executive director of an LGBTQ-based organization in Seattle and a former and current educator. I'm an early learning educator as well as an advocate of early learning. And I bring my experience as a systems change advocate, strategic planner, educator, parent into this position. I'm running because I believe the district needs to be more transparent and accountable, especially when events like 40 elementary schools are reshuffled. I'm running because I think there needs to be stronger community engagement, especially when big decisions are being made around school closures. And I believe representation matters. I will be a strong LGBTQ advocate on the board if elected. I'm endorsed by Seattle Education Association, Seattle Times, and many others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to District 2. Lisa Rivera Smith.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me this evening and for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and why I'm running for re-election to the Seattle Public Schools Board of Directors. I'm the mom of 3 SPS success stories, I like to call them. I have 2 graduates and 1 in 2nd grade. It has been an honor to serve these last 4 years in some of the toughest on record, not just for our district, but for our world. And through it all, I have worked tirelessly to bring diverse voices into our work and bring a lens that I have from my background as a woman of color who grew up in poverty and experienced homelessness as a child. I also bring the skills of my former life as a newspaper reporter, which I exercise by way of asking hard and critical questions to gain a fuller and deeper understanding of the work in front of us and for our communities to bring them along with that work. I'm excited to be running again. I believe, as you all know, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I enjoy being a team player with my board. And thank you again for this evening.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Christina, District 2, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for joining us this evening. I am Christina Poston. I am a career teacher and school principal, and I am running because I believe it is time to use that voice and experience to be part of the greater conversation within Seattle Public Schools. It is a critical time, and my experience has given me the opportunity to understand firsthand and feel the impact, the decisions that are made at the board level and district leadership. I have spent a lot of time working directly with communities, with students, and I look forward to bringing those conversations, that voice, those relationships to really bridge the community with Seattle Public Schools and the decisions that are being made. I'm aware of where families are triggered and upset and where they're happy. So let's bring those voices together. I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And now we will move on to our next district, which we'll start with Evan Briggs. And Evan is from District 3.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Evan Briggs, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm the parent of 3 SPS students. I have a 3rd grader, a 7th grader, and a 9th grader. I'm running for school board because I believe that every child in the city is entitled to a high quality education, no matter what neighborhood they live in. I'm also running because I know that research shows that districts where there is a collegial collaborative relationship between the superintendent and the board have better student outcomes. And I know that from my conversations with current board members that they've done laid a lot of groundwork to change the way the district and the superintendent relate to one another. And I think this is such an important systemic change that I really want to support. In addition, I'm very interested in mental health, fostering more transparency and community engagement, and equitable access to more advanced learning opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. And then from District 3, Ben, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Gittenstein. I'm running for Seattle School Board in District 3, just like Evan. We're in the Northeast, sort of U district over to the water, and the water up north, just a little bit south of Northgate. I've called Seattle home for about 20 years, a little more than 20 years. My first career here in Seattle was as the executive director of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance and the policy director for the Housing Development Consortium, where I focused on affordable housing issues, working in Olympia and here in the city to drive more resources for affordable housing. While doing that work, I learned very clearly and viscerally the relationship between poverty resources and educational outcomes. Ever since then, I've been a passionate advocate for change. I am really passionate about numbers, and 3 numbers I want to focus on are enrollment, which is down 6% over the next 4 years. And our budget shortfall, which is about $450 million in special ed funding. Thanks very much. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. And then Gina Top, District 6 will be our last candidate to introduce herself.
Thank you. And thank you to tonight's hosts and moderators for organizing this, bring together the candidates for Seattle School Board. Education is really the foundation of our democracy, and your work and dedication is so appreciated. My name is Gina Top, and I'm running for Seattle School Board District 6. And to have an idea of where that is, it's West Seattle, SoDo, Pioneer Square, South Park, and Georgetown. Growing up here in Washington, I experienced firsthand the struggles of our underfunded schools. Yet I'm here today because of my public school education. I'm about to send my daughter into the same underfunded system, and like many other parents, I'm worried. We know that Seattle Public Schools is facing a major budget deficit. You know, the board is talking about cutting buses and music programs, laying off teachers, and cutting other critical services. It's clear we need experienced leaders, and I bring that experience. As Chief Legal Counsel and Policy Advisor to the King County Executive, I've managed complex policy and budget challenges, and I will bring that to the Seattle School Board. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you all again for being here this evening. And now we will move to our first question of the evening. And just a reminder, you'll have 60 seconds. What are and have been pros and cons of the student-focused outcome governance SFOG that was adopted by the current board. What changes, if any, would you make? And we'll start with Lisa.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. While I have supported our board's transition to student outcomes focused governance, I've also pushed back on it when and where I felt necessary. As you might recall, when we voted on the SOFG implementation plan, originally it called for a moratorium on policy work. So I put forth a successful amendment that allowed us to continue doing policy work during about the first 9 months of the rollout that we've started. So that was a con that I was able to mitigate for. Overall, though, I do support policy governance, which SOFG is a form of. But I also believe any governance structure we choose needs to be reflective of our community's values, not just for how our schools achieve outcomes for students, but for how we represent the communities who have elected us to represent them. This means, not letting go of our oversight on things like student assignment, on transportation standards, on bail times, because community's been very, very indicative that they want us to keep our finger on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Christina, same question.
Hi there. I'm not quite sure, and I'm starting with a con, unfortunately, because I'm not quite sure where the pros are yet. I don't think that those are visible in a way that is sustainable or we know is impactful at this time. In addition to that, when speaking to a number of school leaders and teachers, the governance was not mentioned at professional development for schools or the district. And so it's not even apparently, as it seems right now, and based on my conversation, it is not even well known to the staff and the people that will be working within these policies. And so unfortunately, I think that is where we need to start, is being very honest and transparent about how we will use this policy, how it will impact schools, and what the work actually looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Gina, do you need me to repeat the question?
I'm good. So as a candidate, you spend a lot of time talking with the public, and when out talking with the public, no one really cares how the school board is governed. What they want is a school board that operates well. And the board adopted a new model of governance after a study that said, the roles and responsibilities of the board, the superintendent, and staff were unclear, and they needed clarity. So student outcomes focused governance is a governing framework that places the vision setting responsibility with the board and gives the superintendent more discretion to implement the vision. I think there are two main concerns I have with student outcomes focused governance that I think need change or clarity. And the first is there needs to be a space or a better way the board can effectively make policy. I think that the space for that is still a little confusing. I think the second is we need to have a clear understanding of the place for community engagement, and there needs to be a place between for engagement between community and board members. And my time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm going to start out with pros. What I appreciate about the governance model is that it does focus on students and that it really looks at how students are faring up in their education. And it takes a deeper look and attempts to take a deeper look at strategies. And I appreciate that, with the hope that with that clarity and transparency, that there's also reflection on what works and what doesn't. I think that remains to be seen. What I have, similarly to other candidates, I have also been talking to community. There is confusion on what it is, and that one of the things that I think is lacking is more of a community engagement process that really grounds this governance model within the values of Seattle Public Schools. I think there's a lack of transparency even amongst board members about how things work. And I think sometimes the language is inaccessible the way that guardrails have been written. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Liza?
Sorry, thanks. Couldn't find my unmute. The biggest con for me is that we are still in process and we are in this transitional time where it is a kind of building the plane while flying it situation, which is the way public education and governance process works. That's the biggest con to me. The pro is that it's a well-established research-backed approach to governance as a board. And a lot of the issues that come up again and again with our public, for example, the staffing things that are happening right now, is that there's not clarity around whose job is what, who has the direction, who's following whose instruction, and how we're held accountable. We've been in this cycle of very reactionary and confrontational governance and management, and the best thing that fully adopting this model will do is provide that clarity that is so desperately needed and help us get better outcomes for kids.
Thank you, Liza. Evan?
So one of the things that I learned that I thought was really interesting was that there was a teaching and learning audit done in 2018 that the district commissioned because of how little progress they had been making on improving student outcomes. And the number one recommendation that came back from that audit was to adopt a policy governance model for the board. So I find that really compelling. I think one of the hugest pros of this model is that this is the first time that we are evaluating the superintendent based on student outcomes. And that has never happened before. So this is the first time we're using progress monitoring and collecting data and evaluating the time use of the board. And I think this is all really important information that we have not been collecting in the past, and we are collecting it now. And I think that's huge. One thing I would change is I do think we need way more community engagement and clarification with the community at large about what this is and how it works. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Evan. Ben?
Thanks. This is a super important question, a super important topic. Every board needs an operating model. We have picked one. Fine. This model is called student outcomes focused governance, but our outcomes right now are not good enough. We can decide that that's the fault of the model, or we can decide that's the fault of the mechanisms driving the model, but we have to start by recognizing that the outcomes we're delivering for students are not good enough and they need to be better. I think there's one great thing about student outcomes focused governance, which is that it presents data in a very clear way for those of us on the outside to see how the district is doing, how we are doing for kids. We've picked 3 goals that we're really focused on, language, math, and career and college readiness, and we publish data on those. And those data say that we're not only far behind our goals, but we're not making progress. I think one of the central reasons we're not making progress has to do with the way the model works. Governance and oversight is a team sport, and we need to get everyone in the board engaged in governance.
Thank you, Ben. So now we will move on to our next question. I thank you, candidates, for adhering to our time. What does the phrase well-resourced schools mean to you as applied to Seattle Public Schools today? And part B of that question, will school closures and consolidations be necessary to help close the budget gap? And Ben, we are going to start with you.
Okay. I'll start with your second question first. No, I do not believe school closures are needed to close the budget gap, and I believe they're actually counterproductive. Now, maybe the district can provide evidence to the contrary, but from at least where I sit, 75 to 80% of our costs are people costs. They come from the humans that we employ, the incredible teachers and staff people that work in all the buildings across our schools. Whether we go from 120 schools to 100 schools, we'll still have the same number of people to employ. So it's hard for me to understand, as someone who likes to look at budgets, how closing schools will materially impact our operating envelope. Now, the second question, the first part of the question you asked, which is what's my definition of a well-resourced school? My definition of a well-resourced school is one that is deeply connected to the community it serves and is adaptable to that community's needs. I think in some cases that's a big school, but in a lot of cases, small schools have a natural advantage in meeting that need.
Thank you, Ben. Evan?
So I think well-resourced schools are schools where kids have everything that they need to succeed. And I think that's going to look different depending on what school and what community you're talking about. But at a baseline, it includes excellent instruction, differentiated learning, and inclusive classrooms. We need to be serving the whole child, which means I think we need adequate mental health support in schools. We need art and music education, and we need to think of these things as integral to basic education and not as luxuries. That's what a well-resourced school means to me. On the question of consolidation, I think nobody wants a school to close, but we also have the realities of a budget deficit that we have to deal with. And I think we don't know yet. We don't know if that is going to, if consolidating some schools is going to be a thing that we need to do, but we know it's not going to be one thing that's going to fix this problem.
All right, thank you very much, Evan. Liza?
Thank you. Yeah, for me, a well-resourced school means a school that has the staffing and resources that it needs to meet the needs of its children in accordance with what the community expects. And a well-resourced system is a system that can ensure that no matter what neighborhood you live in, you will have access to that. And that's where the consolidation piece comes in, is that on paper, consolidating schools won't save money. We could keep all schools open at the cost they are at now, or at a reduced cost. But the problem is that a class that doesn't have enough students in it to be able to have access to a librarian, an art teacher, a music teacher, to not have a whole bunch of split classes, that's not well-resourced. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about consolidation. We can keep a school open with 5 teachers, if that's how many students there are, but those students won't have access to the things that a student in a school with 32 teachers has. And that's what we talk about when we're talking about well-resourced.
Thank you, Liza. Debbie?
When I think about well-resourced schools, I do think that it varies depending on the community. But things that I think about are smaller class sizes for better learning and more intentional learning. I don't think that, again, like I said, not all schools, or not one size fits all. I do think that music, art, theater, mental health are important aspects to a well-resourced school, and educators are within ratio. We know that Dr. Jones has already said that in the Seattle Times, he was quoted that consolidation and school closures will not balance the budget this coming year, that if we do go in that direction, it won't happen for 2 to maybe 5 years. I do think that we need to see the math around school closures, because it is so disruptive to kids and neighborhoods, families, and educators, and it's not a student-centered approach if we really rely on that as one of our budget strategies.
Thank you, Debbie. Gina?
Yeah, this is a lot to talk about in 1 minute. So I'll focus on the school closure part first. You know, no one wants to see schools closed. We've heard that echo over and over again. And while I acknowledge there may be circumstances where it becomes necessary, and it is a policy that has been employed in the past, I'm ready to commit to the idea. However, if school consolidation or closures does become a reality and schools have to close, it's crucial that we do so in a way that engages communities, involved parties, educators. And it means that ensuring that the remaining schools offer enhanced resources for students. Additionally, it's imperative to ensure that there's no reduction in resources during the transition period as schools are closing. And lastly, I'd say it's essential to preserve the positive aspects of the small schools, even in a larger setting. This may include, maintaining the close-knit community and fostering strong connection between educators and their students. To me, a well-resourced school means.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christina, your time is up. I need to move on to Lisa. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start with the second question too. I do not believe that school closures or consolidations are necessary to close the budget gap. But I start with what's at the core of a well-resourced school. And I believe that that's a system of schools with sufficient enrollment to receive the funding, which would then fund a broad spectrum of resources and educational choices at each school. I attended all of our well-resourced school meetings, and what I heard were some very legitimate and integral components of what families and community members believe all schools need. And so I just go back to the wise words of Dr. Brent Jones that we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And that's not because we don't trust the needs of students and families, but we're not funded to the level where we can do everything, unfortunately. So as we nail down the definition of a well-resourced school, I feel strongly that it should be a model that maintains the values of community and whatever the highest priorities from community are.
My apologies for not starting with the timer. Thank you for your forgiveness.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I forgot to
Christina.
start the timer. So I just wanted to share that with you, but you finished your question anyway.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Hello. I believe that a well-resourced school is staffed with individuals who represent the students that they serve and the communities that they serve. I believe that there are mental health specialists and social workers that are available, that buildings are safe and secured and can be secured, that students feel comfortable in their environment, that there are appropriate specialized services for students, and that as a student transitions from elementary to middle to high school, that there is no question about those services and the experience that a student is going to receive, because there is connection and community amongst the schools. And when it comes to school closures, we cannot say for certain, but I do think that we need to be very honest and transparent with our community and timely with the conversations around school closures, the impact, and why that may be a point with the future budget that we have to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. So now we'll go on, candidates, to our next question, which is, what other actions are necessary to balance and sustain the Seattle school budget, including the adequate funding of special education and post-COVID needs? And Gina, we'll have you start this responding to that question, please.
Sure. I took this question very holistically, talking about, long-term, what do we need to do in order to fix Seattle schools budget? The Seattle is not the only school district in the state facing budget problems. To fix our school funding problems long-term, we have to address the underlying issue of Washington's regressive tax structure. Our tax system has remained largely unchanged since the Great Depression, when our economy relied on resources such as salmon, timber, and other commodities. That's not acceptable. Today, our economy has evolved, and it's unacceptable that in one of the most prosperous regions in this country, we struggle to fund education and other critical services. As an attorney with a master's in tax law, I'm not only deeply passionate about how we fund education, but I bring expertise to the table. I'm willing to and ready to work on this with a coalition of school board leaders, local officials, state legislatures to develop a tax system that addresses these needs.
Thank you, Gina. Evan?
I just want to start by echoing Gina's sentiments around our regressive tax system and the myriad problems that poses for our area, which is one of the wealthiest in the world, and yet we see so much that isn't working for so many people. Apart from that, I think what we also need to do, and this is another reason that I appreciate student outcomes focused governance, is we need to continue to collect data so that we can really show that we know what does work and what doesn't work, so that we can provide the state with the evidence that will be compelling enough to ensure that they increase funding for our schools. And I think in order for us to make a strong argument there, we really do need to back it up with data. Thanks.
Ben?
Thanks. It's a great question. The Seattle Public Schools budget woes are, we have about $455 million worth of budget gap between today and the next 4 years. There's really two main drivers of that budget gap. The first is declining enrollment. Enrollment will go down about 6% over the next 4 years, with the biggest losses being in kindergarten and 6th grade. So right at the beginning of the school pipeline and right at the shift to middle school. And the second big driver is the special education funding gap. So we spend about $33,000 per special education needing kid in this city, but we only get paid about $24,000 by the state. As long as we have declining enrollment and we have a special education funding gap, we will always have a budget deficit. We have to go on a massive campaign, community-led, to reignite enrollment in Seattle Public Schools by selling the value of what we do. And we have to go to Olympia, and we probably have to go statewide to build a massive campaign to really solve the special education funding gap. Until we do that, we will always have these challenges.
Thank you, Ben. Lisa?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I think we all will agree that what we need is for legislative action to fully fund our schools. I believe it's absolutely criminal that the bar for public education was set at a level that doesn't actually meet the needs of our students. And the shortfalls have caused us to rely on levies, which are both capped, and rely on property taxes, which hurts lower income communities of color the hardest. And our lack of funding also puts communities in the position of feeling like they are being pitted against each other. It's unfair, unjust, and it is doing our students a grave disservice.
All right, thank you, Lisa. With a little time to spare, Christina?
Hi there. I think two main points that this brings for me is I echo the need for a massive campaign to reach our communities, to understand why our families are leaving Seattle Public Schools, and to really address the enrollment, the trust with our communities, and make sure that we are serving the kids that live within our city, right? The other is we absolutely have to do a deep explore as to where the gaps are between the understanding of the state legislations and how the funding packages have rolled out, and where there are gaps, and how to rebuild the relationships and provide the data to strengthen those relationships and really advocate for appropriate funding for our schools.
Thank you, Christina. Debbie?
Great, thank you. So I believe that, the board, if elected, I would want to be part of a board that really had more of a vision and a multi-pronged approach around generating revenue as well as cuts as far as balancing the budget. What I think is a missing piece right now is a lack of transparency around our budget and questions around how we're spending and the impact of special education. And when talking to lawmakers, I know that has created distrust. And so I am really calling for a biennial independent financial audit district-wide for more transparency around our budget and to build back relationships and trust with legislators. I do agree that we need to have more of a stance around supporting like wealth tax, continuing with the capital gains tax, connecting around increasing more federal funding, having an enrollment campaign that really brings back families as well as brings in new families.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Liza?
So as the board's legislative liaison, I've just, it's posted online now, will be up for introduction to the board at the next board meeting. Our legislative platform priorities draft for the coming session. And so some things that have been mentioned are included there. I built a lot of relationships with not only legislators, but school board directors from across the state, and successfully led advocacy to win the largest increase in special education funding in state's history this past session. As great as that is, it's still not enough. And as large as that increase was last session, there's not a whole lot of willingness to repeat that in the next year or two. So there's a lot of things that we can't control that we can keep advocating for, but we also need to really get serious about our own expenditures and be honest about the budget and whether or not it aligns to what we want for our kids, and being willing to make different choices to use our funds effectively to show improvement.
I'm sorry, I need to move on to our next question, but appreciate everyone trying to stay within the 60 seconds. We have quite a number of questions for you, and we want to have time for audience questions. So now we're going to go on to the next question, which is, should sustainable music programs and other arts programming, sports, along with interests and cultural clubs, be protected during budget decisions? And as a board member, how can you exercise your power in these decisions? And we will begin with Liza.
Thank you. I love this question. I grew up as a violinist, and I have a master's degree in scenic design for theater. So I'm really passionate about the arts, not only as enrichment, but there are real career paths and exciting areas to learn and grow in for enjoyment and professional careers. So as a board director, I think the most important thing that we can do is be really clear in our direction about what we expect at each school. Seattle Public Schools has been very used to behaving as a loosely connected string of independent schools, and we're actually a public school system. And I think we need to get really clear as a board that we do expect a certain level of foundational programming to be present and available at every single school, so that any student in any neighborhood has access to participating in band, participating in orchestra, mock trial, all of those things that are so important to our community.
Thank you, Liza. Debbie?
Well, this is a great question. Yes. So in my connections with families and students in the North and South and Central, and even while door knocking in neighborhoods, I've definitely heard a consistent theme that students and families want access to music, art, theater, and sports, that it is a connector to their education, a connector to their school. It can mitigate absenteeism. I mean, there's many functions that interests of students, it benefits students. And so when I was thinking about this question, I'm like, well, what can the board do to really influence the budget process? And I know the board has created resolutions before that has helped to really guide from a values perspective of what a budget should contain and the kind of values. And I think that that would be another mechanism and tool that the board could use.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you. Yes, I am a huge supporter of our arts programming, and I had even tried to get arts specifically called out in our instructional philosophy, Board Policy 0010, because I believe that arts are that integral. And students have been very clear with us about the critical importance of arts and music and sports. Their educational experiences are not complete without these. And we need to ensure that all students not only have access to these programs, but also the resources to participate, such as supplies and instruments and gear. And as board members, I believe our strongest lever in affecting these decisions is in our approval of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Christina?
Hi there. Yes, we absolutely need to protect music, cultural clubs and activities, sports. The reality of that is, and just to share a very specific example, as a building leader in a previous budget, my leadership team voted using a racial equity analysis tool to cut the morning music program and take that one piece that we had, that flexibility for funding, and take that to lower class sizes in the mathematics. The community was in an uproar and others were so appreciative. And those are really hard decisions that we have to make with budgeting. So in order to protect that, we need to go back to some other pieces as well about transparency in the budgeting from the district level, support for school buildings, and very clear explanation of process and where, why, and how decisions are being made from the district that
Thank
impact
you,
the building.
Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Evan?
So I also have an arts background. I'm a filmmaker and a musician, and I think that this is critical. I think we need to provide this as part of a basic education. And I think for some kids, this access to art and music and sports is actually life-saving. So I think we need to get away from thinking of these things as luxuries, when I think they actually are part of a basic education. And I think in keeping with that, there are so many ways to incorporate, like music theory, for example, is so grounded in math. There's so many ways to bring music and art into classrooms. There's no reason why we need to keep these sort of discrete areas of study when there's so much overlap between them. So I feel really strongly about that. As far as what the board can do, goals and guardrails around making sure that the district does the math to figure out how to create these opportunities equitably at all schools.
Thank you, Evan. Ben?
So maybe I'll start with the question in reverse order. The first question is, what can the board do? Well, state law actually says that the board can tell the superintendent what to do. We don't always have to do that, and that can be very intrusive, and there's reasons why you would want the board to do that all the time. But if the board believes something is really important, they're very much empowered to give clear and direct guidance to the superintendent. The superintendent has to do it. That's how this process works. I believe that art, as everybody else, it is awesome that everybody on this panel is a supporter of the art, that we don't have one of those potential school boards that like thinks of art as a luxury. It's awesome that that's uniform. I think I'd urge us to think of art as actually an enrollment driver, that investing in art and music it creates these crown jewels that get people to come back to Seattle Public Schools or stay there in the long term when they might be considering other options. The school board should use its power to ensure that the district there's no daylight between the board and the district on those investments.
All right, thank you, Ben. And Gina.
Perfect, thank you. You know, one of my favorite things about running for school board is meeting families and hearing about the amazing programs their kids are in at Seattle Public Schools that I didn't know existed before. The music programs, the arts programs, the interest in cultural clubs and sports. And more than once I've heard from parents, my kid was not interested in attending school until they found X, fill in the blank with some activity. For me, X was sports. It's these programs that make kids excited to attend school and learn. And it's these programs that will attract new students to Seattle Public Schools. We need to prioritize and protect sustainable music programs, arts, cultural clubs, sports during budget decisions, and we have to explore creative ways to fund and manage these programs efficiently. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Gina. And now we'll move on to the next question. As action is taken to balance the budget, how should the public process be designed? And does an adequate lens exist?
Did others lose Lois?
How should be applied? Lisa.
Lois, I think you cut out there.
Am I back?
And we lost your
Hello.
question. Oh,
Yeah, Lois, we lost you, but the question is in the chat.
Yeah, I think I was called on, correct? Yeah, thank you. And she did cut out a bit, but I know what she was saying, and I think we're okay. So the question is about the budget,
Yes.
about action taken to balance the budget, and how should the public, so that's the one we're on, right? Okay. Well, as you know, we only take action in public meetings. So it could be argued that that is how we make our process a public process. But we all know that's not enough. That our current process puts the onus on families, where it should be the other way around. We need to take the process to the people and do so in a way that is digestible and understandable with clear pathways to participation in the process. Yes, we do need to we have a racial equity tool, and we do need to actively apply that to the work. And I believe we strive to do that, and especially through our use of participatory budgeting, which we've done for, I think, the last 2-ish years, and via affinity groups. So there's definitely more work to be done, but it is imperative that we do that because, I mean, the budget affects everything.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And hopefully you can hear me again. I had a few technical difficulties, but I am back. Thank you for your patience. Christina.
Hi there. I think that the racial equity analysis tool that has been developed by our district is really an incredible tool, and it should be used in every conversation and decision that is made at the board level. It's asked of school buildings and educators across the board, and that also needs to be modeled by our board and shared with our community. I also believe that in addition to that, if we are talking about, let me quickly read that question. My notes here tell me that how the public process should be designed. We need representatives from every single school. We need to exhaust conversations and outreach until we have representatives from every school, from their PTA, PTSA, students. And we need to be really intentional about all community partners, and those meetings for input, review, and to question some of those racial equity pieces need to be calendared.
Thank you, Christina. Gina.
Yeah, yes, we have to. It's critical. Engage public, families, students, educators, staff, service providers, grandmas, etc., in deciding how we balance the budget. And we have to use an equity lens in doing so. To this role, I bring with me strong community engagement skills. An example that I often use is when it was uncovered that ICE was using the King County Airport. It was my responsibility to build a community engagement and co-creation process with immigrants' rights organizations and community members. And together we created an executive order that stopped ICE from using King County's airport, and it was successful. It's that type of collaboration and engagement demonstrated in this endeavor that I will bring with me to this school board. I think by actively involving the community in the decision-making process, we can truly address some of the pressing issues we are facing.
Thank you, Gina. And now we will hear from Debbie.
So I echo what many have said so far, that yes, absolutely, a racial equity lens should be applied, and our budget process should be grounded in that, both racial and social equity. I mean, I'm running on the belief that there needs to be more transparency from the district, particularly around budget, as well as a stronger community engagement. And I think that someone had mentioned calendared out, that it needs to be enough ahead of time where communities can authentically get involved, that there needs to be multiple approaches, where it can be more of a broader approach, but also a more targeted approach, especially to families that often are not engaged with translation, with different tools that really bring communities to the table, and that they truly understand the budget process, what are decisions being made, that it's digestible in language and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Liza?
Thank you. So something that I'm really excited about as we're implementing our policy governance, student outcomes focused governance framework is actually two pieces that Gina mentioned earlier, which is the the policy development process and community engagement. We have 2 committees working right now, and those are public meetings, to develop a cadence around policy and engagement that is predictable and is understandable, so that people aren't feeling like they have to newly learn or relearn everything all the time, because we will have done our work to put that forward and make it clear to community. So a budget should be a reflection of our values. So if we're doing our job well in policy and in oversight of the district, we should be clear on what the values are as we're developing the budget. And so hopefully that would mean that the budget would be aligned to our equitable goals in goals and, oh, sorry, I'm out of time.
Thank you, Evan.
That's a tough one in 1 minute.
So we do have equity tiering for schools in the budget that exists, but the important thing that we're lacking is the data to show how effective the tiering is. So it's a great tool to have in place, and we also need to be able to show that the way we've tiered schools is actually benefiting the kids, the students that we serve that are furthest from educational justice. As far as ways that the community can be involved in balancing the budget, I actually recently learned of a tool that Tacoma Public Schools has, where it's and I'm going to put the link in the chat so people can check it out, but it's really interesting. It shows the revenue of the school district and the outputs, the expenses, and it allows individual families and community members to balance the budget. And if we did something similar, we'd be able to collect that data, and it would be a reflection of what people valued in the community.
Thank you, Evan. Ben.
So I'd like to challenge us to have a new definition of listening. I think that we often think that listening just means going to a place and taking in input from people. I think that listening includes acting. And we as leaders have a responsibility to go out and seek out the often uncomfortable truths that are often, by the way, in contrast or contrary to the strategy that we may have already adopted. But we have to proactively go out and seek out those uncomfortable realities from the people that we serve. And then once we hear those things, we have to act on them. As a school board member, I can tell you there is no perfect public input process. They're all flawed in some way. But as a school board member, I will try to be someone who listens to people even when they say things that are dispositive of what I was previously going to do, and then to act on those things on their behalf.
Thank you very much, Ben. And candidates, we'll now go to our next question, which is, how will families, teachers, and building staff be involved in decision making? How should they be supported? Ben.
A couple of things. So first of all, I think we have to engage the people who live in the reality of the public schools, who are either receiving the services or delivering the services. We have to engage them much earlier in the decision-making process. One of the challenges when you're running an organization as large as this is that the decisions kind of take on a life of their own, and they get rolling, and they like a big snowball rolling down a hill, and it can become very difficult to change course later on. We need to do a much more intentional job of asking people what they need way earlier in the decision-making process. And as I mentioned before, and I'm just going to keep saying it, we need to be okay if the thing they ask for is different than the thing we were going to do. And then we need to have mechanisms to stop and say, okay, I'm hearing that the thing we were going to do is not what people want. How are we going to act on that? That being said, I'll just make one other comment. I think that we need to find a different balance for how we empower the building leadership teams. Building leadership teams have a really, really tough job in this.
And I'm sorry, we did start your timer a little bit late.
I was confused by that. I felt like I was going long. Okay, that's fine.
Apologize for that.
No, that's fine. Go
It's
ahead.
always nice to bring humanity into this. So we apologize, but we do have a backup timer.
No, go ahead.
That is yours truly. So we will go on to the next candidate. And that is Evan.
So I think it's been widely acknowledged here that family and community engagement needs vast improvement in the district. If there's one thing that I've experienced as a parent in the district for the last 9 years, and certainly as I've been campaigning for this position, is that there are a lot of families who do not feel that communication and engagement are happening in a way that is making them feel that they are part of the conversation. And as a result, there's trust that's broken there, and that's a huge problem. We really need to address that. I think one of the guardrails is that no changes what will happen without community engagement, and that guardrail was obviously recently broken. And I think it's great that we can point to something concrete like that. I think also family engagement, the most important family engagement happens at the building level. And so I think the board has a role in modeling what that looks like. And I know time's up.
Thank you, Evan. Liza.
Thank you. I think again, this may be my theme is clarity. Clarity at the board level is so important when we engage with community. What are we asking for? Who are we asking? What can community members expect to see as a result of what they've been asked? Lisa and I just were working on engaging with community around some guiding principles for an upcoming levy. And we had a few times where, because we knew the issues and knew what we were asking, we were able to say, that is a great suggestion. We share that priority. And this isn't quite the right place for that, but here's where you will see that show up. And I think because things kind of always seem to be a little bit of an emergency, it takes away that opportunity of that context setting and the relationship building to show we've totally heard you and this is important, and the more appropriate place where you will see that feedback is here, or even where that priority exists is here.
Thank you, Liza. Debbie.
So I think the theme is that definitely the school district needs to engage in stronger community engagement, as it was kind of referenced with this last 40 elementary school reshuffle, where it was lacking. What I'm really committed to as a candidate and as if elected, I've heard a lot within District 1 that there's a lack of community engagement and connection. And I want to really bring back multiple ways to connect with community, like having a community forum, a monthly community forum, connecting and going out to schools, PTAs, unions, other community groups within the district, and even citywide, and really be intentional about listening and bringing that back, so that when as a board we're making policy, we're reviewing policy and budget, that I feel very confident that I've listened to multiple voices and
thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much. Gina.
You know, one of the great things is Seattle Public Schools benefits greatly from its exceptional educators and staff, engaged families, an electorate that supports bonds and levies. And, you know, our teachers, educators, school staff are the backbone of our system, working tirelessly in the classrooms and schools to prepare our youth for the future. Ensuring that our educators feel supported in our budget decisions is critical, recognizing their critical role in shaping our students' futures. I'm very proud to have the endorsement from the Seattle Education Association. We need to ensure staff who work hard every day to make the district success are involved in the decision-making. That's also critical. And families, those who are direct consumers of Seattle Public School services, need to be involved in making these decisions. All three of those folks mentioned are critical and should be supported as we try to make important decisions about our children's futures.
Thank you, Gina. Christina.
When I think about what happens at the building level and how structured the building leadership teams are at every single building, there are representatives of staff from each department grade level, there are community members and in many schools, the opportunity for students. The goal of that leadership team is to create a budget and make school-wide decisions that are directly meet the needs of a strategic plan, that have really been taken a critical eye to the racial equity analysis of the decision making, and it goes through the union. And the union has to vote on those decisions, as does that team. How powerful would it be if representatives from that team would also be joined or welcomed to join a committee at the district level that meets all year, calendared out, and is really a part of the conversation.
Thank you, Christina. Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate Gina pointing out the importance of our partnership with our educators and our teachers union. Their involvement in decision-making is critical. And so is that of families. I'm going to be honest, I've spent the past 4 years trying to help communities with this very question of how they can be involved in the decision-making process. We have our formal channels, as mentioned previously, like our building leadership teams, and we also have our board and superintendent task force. But beyond that, it's not very transparent how families can be involved. Even our public testimony opportunities are very much one-way opportunities. And I would very much like to see conversational opportunities at board meetings, not just at regular board meetings, but even at our work sessions and our committee meetings. I've seen it done in the past by past board presidents and committee chairs. And I saw how valuable it was, not just for the community members who felt heard, but by our board members who had a better understanding of how our decisions were playing out for schools and for families.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll go on to our next question. How will community partners who provide before and after and all year school programming and care be involved in decision making? How will they be supported? Gina?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself too much. I think a key theme that is starting to emerge here this evening is there is a need for stronger community engagement with all parties involved. So we try to deliver the best services to our students. Community partners who, that includes community partners who provide before and after school and year-round programming to our students. Those programs are vital to the success of families and need to be involved in the decision-making as an affected party.
Thank you very much, Gina. Evan?
Evan, I think you're on mute.
Evan, you're muted.
Sorry. The district partnerships that we have with the entities that provide before and after care and year-round care are so important. My family has really relied on these groups throughout my kids' elementary school years, and a lot of those counselors are really important adults in my kids' lives. So I think it's really imperative that the board create with the district guardrails around how these partnerships work. Exactly, so that everybody is very much on the same page about what the expectation is and how their voice will be incorporated into the conversation, because these are absolutely vital partnerships. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ben?
Yeah, I think the key here is a lot of the organizations that are described in this question are funded through things like the Family Education Preschool and Promise Levy, which is a long acronym. I think I got that right. And levies like that, Seattle has always funded levies like that. We have a really great history in Seattle of funding those levies, but actually we shouldn't take them for granted. The political will to fund levies like that, we should not take for granted. And I would urge us, and if I join the board, I will focus on figuring out, are those programs, not just listening to the people who deliver the programs, but the people who receive those programs, are they getting the services they need and are they delivering outcomes? Because if they are, then we will continue to build political will and support for those levies. If they are not, then we will eventually see that political will decline. And that's why we need to really focus on results.
Thank you, Ben. Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, this question makes me think about how we rely so much on our district leadership, all our cabinet members, our top district employees, who, as smart and knowledgeable as they are, they're not on the ground. They're not in our schools. Most of them, at least. I mean, some of them are, but most of them are not, and they're not seeing how things actually go on a day-to-day basis. So I absolutely think it's imperative that we are in close communication with our community partners who provide that after and before school care. I mean, if you think back to over a year ago when we were looking at possibly changing bell times, one of the strongest voices in that pushed back on that were our community before and after care providers, because of the drastic upheaval it would cause them and how that would affect their ability to care for our students. So I think it's imperative that we do listen to them. We've done this through our family partnerships and engagement division, which is kind of, we've cut a lot of that. So we need to make sure we're putting the resources in those departments.
Thank you very much. Lisa, Christina?
I know that our school partners are in direct conversation with our students, with our families, and the staff that work in the school buildings. And I can say that every school partner I've had the opportunity to work with has been so eager to step in and support, and always willing to advocate for the program because they truly move mountains for kids. Our community partners know our kids and have such powerful relationships with our students across the board and families, and know things about them that we don't yet, right? They truly are partners to the education of a student, and so in a student's education, excuse me. And so I think it goes back to, let's be really intentional and make sure that those voices are being invited, and again, not just to be listened to, but that are included in our action plans and our strategic plan.
All right, thank you so much. Debbie.
Yes, thank you for this question. And singling out particularly all year round programming and after school programming, I think we're all on the same page that this is really valuable for our communities and students. And when I think about this question, I wonder what the voice is already of after school programs or all year programming. If there's some type of evaluation system where those organizations can evaluate how, what is the communication and that kind of how is it reciprocal with district staff, and where's the accountability around that? And I would hope for some type of evaluation could be presented at the board level, that the board could hear and really understand maybe levels of communication and accountability that could be improved upon, and that relationships could be better and more valued. Thank you.
Thank you. Liza.
Thank you. I really appreciate this question. Since I've been involved in advocacy and just as a parent also, the sort of patchwork and inconsistency that we have with different community partners and programming it relies a lot. Availability of programming and support relies a lot on an individual principal or building. It relies a lot on PTA funding, grant funding, Best Starts for Kids, the school applying for a grant, or the community partner applying for the grant. All these things that sort of are scrambled together, and these are really critical partners and people that are a hugely important part of our families and of kids' education. So I would actually really like to bring something more central in establishing, ensuring that there's equitable access to these opportunities throughout the district. that we're really focusing on meeting the needs of our students and families and providing sustainability for that programming across the district.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to our next question. How does early childhood education intersect with K through 12? And what role should Seattle Public Schools play in providing childcare space and in transition to kindergarten or TK programming? Lisa.
Thank you. I absolutely believe that early childhood education intersects with their K-12 experience. I'm our board's Head Start liaison, so I've got to spend the last, I think all 4 years I've been that, and I've been able to meet with our early learning department monthly, and I'm just impressed with their work and just the growth of that inclusion-wise for our preschool and Head Start programming. I remember when Dr. Jones came on board, he met with, I'm sure, each of us and asked kind of what our priorities were, where we saw.
Thank you, Lisa.
Had a great story for you too, but okay.
I just wanted to confirm, Lois, we're at 30-second questions right now.
We are still at 1 minute questions. This is our last
I
1 minute.
apologize. Lisa has 30 more seconds. Then.
Okay, I'll finish my story. Yeah, so that I'm really big on the bookends of preschool to college prepared or post-education preparedness, because it is that integral that we start our students with a great foundation that'll see them through their K-12 years. So I actually really love the transition to kindergarten program that SPS is currently not. We don't do that here. I've seen it play out in other districts very well. And as you probably know, it's a legislatively established program for children who are at least 4 years old. And anyways, it's very targeted and awesome.
Thank you, Lisa, and sorry for interrupting your thought there.
It's okay, thanks.
Christina.
Hi, so early childhood education, we know that is so important. In terms of the social and emotional learning, the interacting with peers, right? The spatial and body awareness, curiosity, those pieces that when students have access to hands-on opportunities and that interaction is just so fruitful for them, right? And so I think that it absolutely needs to be a priority. I think in addition to and separately, we talk about childcare and childcare just across the board before school and after school at all ages is necessary. And it repeatedly comes up in conversations for our families. And so I think that both of those pieces need to continue to be a priority in our conversation and something that I definitely look forward to jumping into and also learning more about where we are as a district. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Debbie.
So I am an early learning advocate at both the state level and also in Snohomish County, working with multiple school districts. And I believe very strongly in the importance of prenatal to third grade alignment, that is essential for racial equity outcomes for students. I also believe strongly that we do need to have a preschool and Head Start robust program in every elementary school, but also positive and strong relationships with various childcare providers close to elementary schools, and that their MOUs are being honored and there's good communication. As far as transitional education or transitional kindergarten, the district should not be in competition with childcare providers. They should be in collaboration and in intense communication around this. If the district does decide to go with a transitional kindergarten program, there's a lot more to say.
Thank you very much. Evan.
So we know, as other people have mentioned, that early learning is one of the most important determinants for outcomes for students. So this is absolutely relevant to Seattle, to K through 12 education. It is so much better for our school district if our kids are coming in to our system already prepared and already having been given the best opportunity to lay a foundation for their future academic success. Like that is so critical. We have a really strong, currently the district has a really strong relationship with the Department of Education and Early Learning. And I think that's something that we need to continue to foster and make sure that relationship continues. And I also think that I know that we have joint use agreements with many entities in the city. And I think we need to use any empty buildings that we have to provide early learning and childcare opportunities.
Thank you, Evan. Ben.
Yeah, we've known for at least 20 years with a lot of data that a dollar spent on early learning turns into at least $3 of GDP output, of benefit to the broader community. We basically, every time we put a dollar into early learning, we turn into 3x output in for the rest of our community. It's an incredibly fruitful investment. I hate to be like the enrollment guy, but the thing about early learning deeply wedded into Seattle Public Schools is it's a great way to also drive, it's a great long-term investment in future enrollment. You're basically building up your pipeline before the kids are even done with pre-K, which is awesome. The challenge that we have is that early learning often leads to bigger schools because we tend to use bigger consolidated schools to create spaces for early learning. I'd encourage us to think about how we can use smaller schools as places to also house early learning opportunities for kids, which we know pay huge dividends.
Thank you, Ben. So candidates, our next set of questions will have approximately.
Sorry, I didn't get the chance to answer that one. I don't know if you, and
I missed it too.
I apologize. I've obviously gotten ahead of myself. I'm looking at the clock here, so forgive me. Gina?
Sure. Thank you. And sorry to interrupt you. You know, as a mom, as a mom right now, I'm in the early childhood education space. So I get to watch every day all the amazing new things my child is learning and witnessing sort of firsthand the importance of early childhood education. And I am so proud of the work that I've done on Best Starts for Kids, which is a King County voter approved initiative to support every baby born or child raised in King County to reach adulthood happy, healthy, and thriving. I think as a district and as board member, I think we need to do all we can to support early childhood education and childcare space in our schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I apologize. Did I miss any other candidates on this question? Liza, I believe I need to hear your voice.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This one is a really important one for me. My advocacy journey over a decade ago really started with early learning, and especially as it pertains to children with disabilities. And also we don't have transition to kindergarten in Seattle. The transition to kindergarten was so critical for districts across the states that don't have like Seattle preschool program like we have, and that funding was really critical for them. For us in Seattle, we're really lucky to have those partnerships and that voter support for early learning programs. But early identification and intervention of disability is so critical for disabled students as they move through our system. The more we can connect that early learning opportunity and connect them to that to an easy transition with a community they know from preschool to kindergarten and throughout the system, the better we are setting up all of our kids for success. I have been leading on demanding that our preschool spaces are inclusive and will continue to do so.
All right, Liza, thank you. And candidates, thank you for your patience and helping to make sure we stay open to hearing everyone's voice. So the next set of questions will be 30 seconds timed from this point on so that we make sure that there is room for our audience questions. So Are there changes or improvements that you would like to make to the current relationship between Seattle schools and the city of Seattle? Should the board have oversight on the revitalization of Memorial Stadium? Liza.
Thank you. So something that I know used to exist was a joint committee between SPS and the city. And I would really like us to bring that back, especially as the city is doing its One Seattle initiative and talking about development. I think we need to be in spaces together more often. And in terms of Memorial Stadium, we do have oversight over that. That is our project that belongs to SPS. We're partnering with these other organizations, but it's ultimately up to votes of the board.
Thank you, Liza. Debbie?
In talking to a few city council members, they have told me that there is room for improvement with kind of relationship between the school board as well as the city of Seattle, and a deeper understanding of what each entity does and how they can better partner. And yes, I do believe that there needs to be oversight of the revitalization of the Memorial Stadium. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Lisa.
Thank you. I absolutely believe in strengthening our partnership with the city. We have a strong partner in Mayor Harrell, who goes back a long ways with our superintendent. And we have a board member as a liaison to the FEP levy with DEAL, Department of Early Learning. And there's more to it than that. Anyways, my point is, yes, strengthening that partnership is paramount. As far as Memorial Stadium goes, we are the oversight of that. Already as board members, we've had the opportunities to be involved with walking tours with students and in other meetings. So we're going to continue to do that.
Thank you, Lisa. I just want to let the audience know that Christina had to leave. And she thanks everyone for this opportunity. Ben.
I'll focus on Memorial Stadium. Yeah, we should take a really careful look at the Memorial Stadium oversight, the way that's going to work. Because the thing that worries me most tangibly is that that's going to become a really big project, which a lot of people are going to want to use really often. And we need to make sure that Memorial Stadium as a space is actually primarily available for our students and our activities first. And I think that's really easy to say at the beginning of the project, but it's probably really hard to live up to later when there's big voices who want to use it for big events.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. Evan?
It's been said many times, but yes, I do know from my conversations with the board that they do have oversight over Memorial Stadium. And I also know that the board has a very strong relationship with the mayor right now and with DEAL, the Department of Education and Early Learning, and that's great. And again, I think those need to be sustained. And I think we need to grow our relationship with the city of Seattle. And I think this is especially critical when we're talking about safety and community safety, that this is an important component to that.
Thank you. Gina.
Yeah, I'll talk fast here. So Seattle Public Schools has an amazing opportunity to make Memorial Stadium an amazing gem for our city for sports, to celebrate amazing milestones of graduation and so much more. And yes, the board should have oversight over Memorial Stadium. I think we also need to make sure we are building stronger relations, not just with city leaders, but county leaders and state leaders, because there are so many ways in which there is opportunities for collaboration and leverage of resources. And last, I have a hard stop at 8:30, so I will share my contact information with the host to send out if folks have further questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go on to our next question. Should communities, neighborhoods, and families not yet attending school be involved in decision-making? This is a yes or no question. Should communities, neighborhoods, and families not yet attending school be involved in decision-making? Ben.
Yes.
Evan.
Yes, absolutely.
Liza.
100% yes.
Debbie.
Yes.
Gina.
Oh, Gina left, Lois.
She must have left off. Yes, I see it's 8:32. Lisa.
Ideally, yes.
All right, thank you, candidates. And our next question is also a yes or no question. Is committee work being accomplished now and adequately shared with others, including the public? Evan?
Are we literally just allowed to say yes or no? There's no nuance.
Just say it, say what you need to.
Okay, so I think that everything that was committee work is now full board work. However, whether the extent to which it's being adequately shared with others, including the public, is not happening in to the degree that it should. But the work is being accomplished, I believe.
All right, thank you, Evan. And with Joanna's permission, we're going to move to 30 seconds on that, which Evan, I believe that you used approximately. So Ben.
There is committee work happening, but I think one of the downsides of the adoption of SOFG is that we've reduced the total number of standing committees. And I think some of those standing committees do have value. So I think we need to bring some of those back and reinvigorate them. I'd also say that committees are a great place for engagement and activity, but they're also a great place for oversight to happen. They're where you can see on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis and month-to-month basis some reports that aren't super fun, but they're really important to.
Lisa.
As the former chair of the operations committee, I miss them. I do believe they served a purpose. I don't believe they were well communicated with the public. I don't believe that, again, there wasn't conversations at them. It was people who could be there. They're usually during the day, so they weren't very accessible. The materials were not available online. You had to request them separately. So there was a lot of problems with them as they were. I do believe that they were a great place for oversight. I like the issue we just had with some of the classroom allocations. I think we could have discussed earlier and had maybe some input on, and hopefully had a better outcome there.
Debbie? Thank you, Lisa.
My general answer is no. I also agree that I think there needs to be standing committees brought back. I do, talking to other board members, I have heard that there was more information shared. That people who did pay attention to those meetings, they found it more accessible. I think there's more ways that the board and the district could be more accessible about community meetings or board work. And so I think there's room for improvement. So thank you.
Thank you. Liza.
Yeah, so work of the prior standing committees is now work of the full board, which I actually think makes that information much more accessible to the full public. And it is posted and included in meeting materials with regular meetings, as opposed to, as somebody said, you had to, I think it was Lisa, ask for those to be posted. So that work is still happening and is actually more accessible to the public, in my opinion. And more importantly, or not more importantly, but as importantly, the full board has all the information together at the same time. There's also ad hoc committee work that's also published.
Thank you, Liza. This is a 30-second question. Give one concrete example of a safety measure you think is or has been vital to our schools. Please use one word or a short phrase to respond. Evan, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, it's
I think it's right here. Oh, one concrete example of a safety measure. One, I would say mental health. Oh, we have 30 seconds. Okay. Yeah, so I think mental health is a really important component of safety. And I think that holds true for our student population, but also for advocating for increased mental health supports at the community level, so that we can ensure that the communities where our schools are located are also as safe as possible.
Thank you, Evan. And it is a little bit after 8:30, so we're just making sure everyone's still awake. Ben, would you respond?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I think one of the most underrated safety mechanisms we have is a portfolio of small and diverse schools. I think small schools enable principals and their staff to understand what's going on in the community of students in that school and to connect those students to resources that they need, and to spot kids who might be having trouble or might be in crisis before they reach a real crisis. So I think small schools are actually a totally underrated safety mechanism in our system.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. I was trying to think of one that people might not think of, but I think our board's initiative to get rid of portables is actually a huge safety measure, because portables are not as safe as our classrooms. I'll admit, though, we haven't really lowered the number. It has actually gone up, but of the portables we have, we've gotten rid of the more ones that weren't as safe, either health-wise because they were using gas boil or furnaces, or because they just didn't have the locking mechanisms or the communications they needed. So that's an ongoing initiative to lessen our use of portables.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie.
I've been able to witness as well as talk to educators and students. And one of the things that have come up is the idea of if you're asking for a security specialist within your school, somebody who really creates more of a positive environment, who is trained in de-escalation, who is very relationship based, and students know, educators know, and just that relational approach. And it's been really kind of interesting to see teachers request it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Liza?
Community safety teams. These are something that are being brought back that existed prior to the pandemic and are coming back. And these are teams that include building leadership and community members around the school that, our kids' safety exists beyond our walls. And when we have community partners coming together, sharing information, caring for the same students, knowing each other, we're going to improve community safety. I'm really supportive of those being brought back.
Thank you. So at this time, this part of the program will move to audience member questions. And a special thank you to Joanna Cullen, who is the chair of the Education Committee for the League of Women Voters, Seattle-King County, for sharing them with us. So each of these audience questions will have 30 seconds candidates to answer. So I will begin with our first audience question. How will you collaborate with your fellow school board directors if you disagree with them? Liza.
Well, if you've watched board meetings, you've seen this in action, I think. I think ultimately we have to honor each other's positions and also honor our votes as a board. So when there's disagreement, we can obviously respectfully disagree. We do have to have those conversations in public. But my sort of anchor is to think about what positions we voted on as a board and tie it back to those things that are common agreements as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Debbie?
How I usually work with people that maybe I have a disagreement with, or we're at a different level of values, is I'm curious. I ask questions. I try to have a sense of curiosity and listen, and really get a better understanding about where someone else is coming from and why. And what I have found is that if we have similar values, that can be, if we're grounded in that, we can often continue the dialogue to get to the next place.
Thank you, Debbie. Lisa.
Thank you. I think one of our strengths is our disagreement on items, because that just shows we're coming at it from different vantage points. I'm going to get the words wrong, but as Director Harris would always say, constructive criticism is important, and the ability to do so, respectfully and with, kind of putting our respect for each other's positions first, and then coming at it with our own viewpoints and not feeling like we can't do that. I think a lot of us are really good at doing that.
Thank you, Lisa. Evan.
I think this is a really great question, because I think solid relationships are so much the foundation of this work, and so much about what we want to model for our kids. So I think one important, I think the fact that that board members are going to disagree. I think that's great that kids see that happening and they see hopefully adults behaving like adults and respectfully engaging with one another. And
thank you, Evan. Ben.
Yeah, I guess I would say a couple things. First, I used to work with someone who would say people aren't conflict averse, they're resolution averse, because the conflict is happening whether you like it or not. And I think the key here is to, one, have the conversation. If there's conflict, like, have it. It doesn't have to be in public on the days, it can be behind closed doors, but you have to have the conversation. The second is to try to seek to understand before, at first, why does the person disagree with you? And lastly, I would just say, like, there's a lot of talented people on this podium here. I've had an experience doing this in Olympia. I think it's very doable.
Thank you. And our next question will be directed to Lisa. Tell what the equity lens means to you.
Thank you. I think it means seeing things from the sort of the vantage point of those you hear from the least, right? We sort of have our reaction of what we think the answer is to certain issues, but we got to remember, for all the voices we're hearing, there are so many more that we're not, and those are the ones that have been either disenfranchised, they don't have access, they don't have the agency to be involved. So making sure that we step back from the loudest voices to hear from all voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie?
When I talk about an equity lens, I'm talking from an intersectional perspective. And I think when you're talking about, for example, racial equity, you're also including disability equity, gender equity, LGBTQ equity, equity around students and families that are homeless, the voices of including families that are foster care families. It's that intersectional analysis and really deepening your questioning and who's being included.
Thank you, Debbie. Liza.
An equity lens to me means being inclusive in decision making. Just that any decision you make, learning to understand how the impacts will be different on different populations, how achieving the same outcome might require different paths to get there, different allocation of resources. An equity lens means thinking about how to achieve a goal and put whatever it is in place that needs to be there for all people of all marginalized backgrounds to
Thank
reach
you,
that.
Liza. Thank you so much. Ben.
I think the value of an equity lens is that it forces you to think beyond where your normal walk of life. So I'm a white male who lives in the northeast of Seattle. Like, my walk of life is relatively confined to that experience. It's hard for me to see beyond that. And the value of an equity lens tool is it forces you to look beyond that. I think that's super valuable, especially on a day-to-day decision-making basis. I would challenge us, though, to do more than just ask the question, but to demand the results for equity. And I think that's where we maybe are falling down.
Thank you, Ben. Evan?
To me, equity lens means having to do a lot of personal work. First, in recognizing where your own blind spots are going to be, what you don't have a lived experience with, and making sure that you are going out and being interacting, building relationships with communities and people who have had really different lived experiences, and using that information, making sure that you are always aware of who is being impacted. Okay.
Thank you, Evan. Our next audience question: what do you think is the appropriate way to bring advanced learning to neighborhood schools? Ben.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we have right now is that we had an advanced learning model that had real problems and was flawed. And what it feels like now to most parents that I talk to out on the campaign trail is that we have basically thrown that model out, but not replaced it with something. And that's not okay. We need to bring back a model that lets families feel like there is a place for their kid who needs advanced learning, but doesn't just give lip service.
Thank you, Ben. Evan?
Agreed. The previous model was problematic, and I think it got thrown out and not replaced with anything. And that's a huge problem because advanced learning is important. I think one of the models that I think is really amazing in our school district is the IB program that's available at Rainier Beach High School. I think that's one example of a way to bring advanced learning. I think the main thing that we need to make sure is that this is equitable, the access.
Thank you. Liza?
Thank you. State law actually has a pretty good direction about what to do. And I've actually brought revisions forward about, or am bringing revisions on this policy. There's a draft sitting to answer the questions that the state demands we answer. And so there's a bunch of different ways that advanced learning can come to neighborhood schools. What's really important is that we commit to them and hold schools accountable and so that they have the resources that they need to be able to actually provide them.
Debbie?
Yeah, I will agree with some folks already that HCC has essentially been taken away, but there hasn't been a plan to replace it. What I've been hearing from both teachers and parents and families is that differentiation is not necessarily inadequate, but it's uneven in how it's being practiced. There's not enough training for educators to be successful. And again, I would reiterate that if you're going to take away a program, the board and the district has to replace it.
Lisa?
I agree. I think that the most appropriate way to do it is to make sure our schools are prepared for it, make sure our teachers, our educators are prepared with the training and the just the resources they need to attend to the multiple levels in their classrooms. Also make sure it's done equitably, and we just talked about, because the students who need access to it aren't always the ones we're identifying. So as we improve our identification process, that'll help play out in our schools so that it's done in a healthy way.
All right, thank you. We have time for one more audience question. What is the primary goal of dual language immersion programs? Evan?
I think I think there's a few different goals here. I think one of them is just opportunity for kids to be exposed to have the opportunity to learn a second language, which is something that American children are really lacking in opportunities to do. It's also really important for kids who come from families who do not speak English as their first language, that they have an opportunity to learn their home language during the school day.
Thank you very much, Evan. Ben?
I think it's about helping expose kids to a way of thinking and a whole set of cultures and language that you wouldn't otherwise get, and serving kids for whom English is not their first language. I think the real challenge with dual language immersion programs is that they don't fit into cleanly into a consolidated school model, and they fit better in a diverse population of small schools.
Thank you, Ben. Lisa?
I think the first and foremost goal of dual language immersion should be for gap closing. We have non-native English speakers who come to our schools, and they're already at a disadvantage because we primarily use English everywhere. So that should be the main goal of it. It has also turned into, a great opportunity for English-speaking families, but we really need to make sure we don't lose sight of its first primary goal, which is gap closing. And I would love to see, it be available in more schools because there is more need out there. And I like people have said, though, there are difficulties with funding and support of it.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie?
I would agree with what Lisa just said. I think the primary goal is really to serve English language learners, and as far as students, it's a growing population within our school district, and Currently, what I've been hearing from families that speak English as a second language is that English language learners are being funneled or slated into special education programs where that is not appropriate. They really need that gap.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just doing my job. Liza?
Thanks. Yeah, the primary goal is that students who speak a language other than English as their first language are able to access education in the language that is their primary language. The additional benefits are that other students or students who speak English can learn and be exposed to other languages and cultures. But the primary goal is gap closing. And I think we have so many IAs and teachers who are multilingual that I think we can increase dual language in any school.
Thank you. And so now, candidates, we want to thank everyone for your participation in the remaining questions, and we'll pass them on to the candidates. And so as we come to the end of our evening, candidates, we want you to please give us a 30-second closing statement. Evan.
I think the thing that I would like to spend my time talking about is how inequitable the opportunity to even run for a school board position is. Having been involved in this campaign for a number of months, I'm realizing that it takes an incredible amount of resources and privilege to run for this job. And as a result, I think there's a lot of voices missing from the school board that are really important that actually really need to be on the board. And I think we need to address that.
Thank you, Evan. Ben.
First of all, I want to thank you and all the folks who put this event on. Thanks so much. I know it's late. It took a lot of work. Coordinating all of us is not easy, and no one's getting paid to do this. So I appreciate you and I appreciate the work that everybody did, and everybody who stuck around till 8:55. I think we need to take the seriousness of our situation in Seattle Public Schools as seriously as the moment deserves. And I'm running for school board because I'm willing to take on that challenge no matter what needs to be done.
Thank you, Ben. Lisa.
Likewise, thank you everybody for being here, sticking around this late. It takes a lot to be a candidate, and I appreciate everybody who's stepped up to do that. I appreciate the support I received from friends, family, other board members. My endorsements I'm honored to receive from the Seattle Education Association, King County Dems, the Stranger, MLK Labor, multiple district Democrats, and again, just really excited to continue doing good work for our students.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie.
Similarly, I want to thank everyone. This is late and I appreciate people still here. I want to quickly just say that what's really important to me is I do believe that representation matters, and I want to be a strong LGBTQ voice on the board if elected. I also really believe deeply that more transparency and accountability, as well as community engagement, is essential. And both Ben and I are teaming up on some town halls throughout the city that is going to talk about school closures as well as the elementary shuffle. Thank you.
Much. Thank you, Liza.
Thank you. Yes, thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's been a really interesting and challenging 3.5 years, 3 3/4 years, which for some reason I want to continue to do. And I'm really proud to have the endorsement in that by The Stranger, One America, Alliance for Gun Responsibility, Seattle Building and Construction Trades, King County Democrats, a handful of legislators, current and former school board directors, and civil rights, education, and labor leaders from the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liza. And I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. Our time has come to an end. Thank you very much for the candidates for being here. We appreciate your desire to serve Seattle's public school community and for the sacrifice of your time. At this time, I'll turn the program over to Joanna Cullen. Joanne? Joanne, you're muted. Joanna, you're muted. There she is.
Hi. Let me get for some reason, right at the very moment that my name came up, I lost the, so I'll be right. Oh,
So while-
sorry about this. It's amazing how you can be on something right there and then you're not. Anyway, Lois, I wanted to thank you because if we had applause, it would be happening now for you. I want to thank Allison Fair for all of the support she continually gives us. And a recording of the Zoom will be on the league website and the YouTube channel. And you may share those links, but sharing anything that is not the complete video is prohibited. And I want to also say, anyone who wants to come to one of our education committee meetings, you can find information on how to contact me on the website, on the league website. And thank you, candidates and